Ethereum isn't just pumping, it's breaking out in a way that we haven't seen in years. And I've been historically bearish on Ethereum, but over the last few months, I've really started to stack Ethereum hard. We're seeing institutions come in that are raising billions of dollars to buy Ethereum as part of their treasury strategy, and I'll show you all those insights on the blockchain. We saw the incredible success of Circle's IPO, and many are calling stablecoins kind of crypto's ChatGPT moment. We're seeing real world tokenization take hold, with really Robinhood kind of driving some of that initiative by even offering the earliest kind of tokenized stock options. And for the first time in years, we have this extremely friendly crypto administration, and even just today, passed some bills that we'll dive into that we're expecting Trump to go ahead and sign. And so really just everything is coming together, and why I believe it makes sense to bet big on the Ethereum ecosystem for the rest of 2025. At this point, many people have seen the enormous success that MicroStrategy has employed when buying Bitcoin. And so what we're seeing now are multiple institutions that are really going to adopt that framework and are making this enormous bet on Ethereum, where now we're seeing in aggregate potentially billions of dollars going to head and to be used to accumulate Ethereum for these treasury strategies. And so one of these companies is called Bitmine Immersion Technologies. And we have a Tom Lee here that is going to head and be appointed the chairman and board of directors. And Tom Lee is actually quite known in the traditional finance world, right? He's on CNBC Fast Money, as well as other shows, and really kind of known for his macro outlook. And you can see here they raised $250 million to go ahead and implement this strategy to buy Ethereum for its treasury. And they're really making this a big bet on stablecoins. And then just weeks later, after Tom Lee makes this announcement, we see billionaire Peter Thiel actually take a significant stake of about 9% in this company. And Bitmine's goal is actually to hold 5% of all of Ethereum's total supply. And you can see here that they've already increased their holdings to $1 billion and hold over 300,000 Ethereum tokens. And this is just all in the recent last few weeks. So they've already surpassed 1 billion in Ethereum just 7 days after they closed on the initial 250 million private placement. And the reason why Tom Lee and Bitmine, as well as other companies I'm going to showcase, are making this massive bet on Ethereum fundamentally comes down to a few things. But one of them is basically tokenization. So we've seen Robinhood already launch essentially tokenized stocks, which are kind of the first iteration of already some private companies. And so you can even see here Vlad, which is the CEO of Robinhood, basically say that tokenization is the greatest capital market innovation since CLOBs, which are central limit order books, which is essentially what you would see as like the New York Stock Exchange. The second part of this bet here, and Tom Lee goes ahead and speaks with Pantera Capital, which is a prominent venture capital firm, which is the biggest bet on stablecoin adoption, right? So we just had Circle's IPO, which was a monstrous success. And if stablecoins are going to have this massive adoption that everyone's anticipating, then Ethereum is really going to be best positioned to take advantage of that. If we look at stablecoins today on the on-chain markets, we can see it's about 260 billion and really has added significant upside really in just the last few years. And so about 50% of all stablecoins still reside on the Ethereum ecosystem, which means that they are obviously best positioned to take advantage of that. And so Tom Lee goes ahead and further kind of explains how even enormous banks like JP Morgan plan on creating their own stablecoin and have already acknowledged that they will use Ethereum for all of this. Then what we have is another fund. We have a SharpLink Gaming, which is publicly listed on the NASDAQ as the ticker SBET, goes ahead and completes a 425 million private placement led by Consensus. And these are actually the creators of MetaMask as well. What we can see here is that they are buying just massive amounts of Ethereums, right? 175,000 ETH, 12,000, 65,000. So this is going to give them a total right now of 280,000 Ethereum, or just shy of $1 billion. So what we're seeing now is between just Bitmine and SharpLink, they both now in just really the last few weeks hold $1 billion worth of Ethereum each. And the great thing about SharpLink is that their wallets have already been tagged by Arkham Intelligence, which is a dashboard that you can go ahead and look at different insights. And so we can actually see here from Look All Chain, who is kind of sharing often in real time that, when they're exactly purchasing. And so even just on July 17th, they made a purchase of another $115 million worth of Ethereum. And if that wasn't insane enough, they have basically committed to raising $5 billion to do additional Ethereum purchases. At this point, you can see that there's multiple funds popping up, billions of dollars being raised. And so this is the last one I'm just going to quickly touch on before we probably move on to more interesting things. But there is another company called BTCS, which is listed on the NASDAQ, and they went ahead and raised $225 million for Ethereum placement. But they're doing something a little bit different, which I think is actually really cool. So you can see just right now, they've raised about 29,000 Ethereum, which as of a couple of days ago was worth about $90 million. But what's pretty interesting to see is if we scroll down is they're actually using Aave and many other DeFi products integrated as part of their strategy. So they've kind of put out what they're calling the acceleration flywheel, which is basically as share appreciates, they can go ahead and do a capital raise, which will allow them to buy more Ethereum and then of course generate revenue. You can see here they've have some ideas where they plan on essentially operating validator nodes. And at this point, Ethereum is adding about $500 million worth of flows daily as of this week. And we can kind of see here just in the last 3 months that the Ethereum ETF has taken in just over $18 billion, right? So looking at both the Bitcoin and Ethereum ETF have honestly been the most successful ETFs that have ever existed. And it's kind of interesting to see because even just last year, right, back in August all the way through November, we actually saw flows go negative. And so really, again, sentiment has come around. I spoke a bit about it earlier, how price truly leads narrative, and that's really what you're seeing here. And given all the success of these ETFs, right, BlackRock was really the first one to kind of pave the way here with this Bitcoin ETF. They've actually just applied to add staking, which would be enormous, right? Think about a concept where you can essentially take the concept of dividends, and which a lot of TradFi has familiarity with, and introduce them to the idea of staking rewards. Obviously, just because they apply doesn't mean they get it right away. There is a process and deadline and approvals. And so we have James here who helps clarify some of this for us, who basically said that other people have applied for this, and those deadlines are in late October. So BlackRock's filing won't have a deadline until April 2026. But the reason why he's saying is that he expects it to be Q4 of 2025 is because what the government likes to do is they like to kind of approve them in one batch. This way, that gives an equal kind of playing field so that all of them can be competitive for each other, and they're kind of not letting one person kind of on the sidelines while the others kind of steal the market share. So I think it's a great opportunity. We could see them kind of all come together in approvals later this year. Another thing that's just really going to help with the openness of this market is people are expecting Donald Trump to sign this executive order, which is really going to allow 401k plans to have a lot more investment opportunities. At most companies today, if you have a 401k plan, you're usually quite limited in what your investment options are, right? Other individuals like myself have essentially what's called a brokerage link, so I can already buy options or buy any ETF or stock that I want, but that's not the case for most Americans. And there's a massive amount of wealth that's kind of locked up in those plans. And so what Donald Trump wants to do is, of course, open up those markets and not only give those individuals access to crypto, but everything from private equity, precious metals, and some other items. And this puts us in a really great place because today on July 17th, we saw a massive news where the bill that was introduced by Bill Hagerty, which was the Genius Act, which was synonymous for the stablecoin bill, was actually going ahead and passed. And now they're expecting, of course, Donald Trump to signing it into law. And this actually comes on the back of several bills where we saw the Clarity Act and the Anti-CBDC Act that were all passed, and so we're expecting all of that, of course, to get wrapped up quickly. Obviously, this comes as perfect timing because a few weeks ago, right, they had announced that this was going to be crypto week, and they ensured, they delivered, and they executed. So really great to see kind of all these things come together. What's really interesting about this breakout is really for the last year, it was incredibly easy to just kind of dance on Ethereum's graveyard, right? And even some of the most respected traders I know, like Andrew Kang here and Ansem, were still bear posting at the literal Pico bottom. Now, you have to kind of split between like what is their engagement rage baiting versus like what is their true perception of the markets. But I think it's quite clear that you can see just a general consensus of essentially people just kind of giving up on the Ethereum ecosystem. And I loved bear posting Ethereum as well. And even back in April when I was chatting with I will recommend drop and follow, I had announced that I had rebought some of my Ethereum because Vitalik had come out with some commentary that he was going to kind of reform the foundation. And you can basically see here is my sentiment, which I was fully intending to just be let down. But little did I know I was actually getting super lucky as I was placing bids on what would essentially be the bottom in the beginning of this monstrous rally. We could probably wrap this up by looking at some charts here, right? So it's been very easy to be bearish on Ethereum, honestly, for the past several years. And what do I mean by that? So here we have the ETH BTC chart, right? So this is Ethereum's price divided by Bitcoin. And we can see here, this price, this chart has been down only since mid 2021. This would mean that you would have been significantly better off just holding Bitcoin the entire time, right? Since 2021, Ethereum has lost 60% of its value when compared to Bitcoin. And for the most part, when Solana was also having its own monstrous run, right? Since 2023, give or take, this has also been basically a straight down line, right? So there was just so many opportunities in this market. For a long time, it didn't make sense to hold Ethereum, but truly believe we're seeing that turn around. Obviously, if we take a really kind of zoomed out look here, you can actually argue that this is basically a bottom that we're putting in on this massive, right, higher time frame. So we're starting to see here make a lower high, and we're kind of starting to kind of shape up to what might look like some bullish momentum. Now, if we take a look at Ethereum's price chart, and we can clean this up a tiny bit, we can basically see here that the last big dip came down to the January 2025. This was kind of this cascading liquidation, but we had this nice V-shaped recovery, and then we've kind of really been chatting up ever since. So right now, I don't really see any big resistance until basically all-time highs. So kind of just expecting all air until then. Honestly, of course, this will be a big moment, right? We hit this back in the past several times. So this will be a big moment to see if we can really kind of explode through that ceiling and kind of go into price discovery, which I think there's a lot of things lining up where it would make sense for this time to be that moment. And of course, if Ethereum continues this uptrend, what you can expect is the kind of a rising tide lifts all boats with the Ethereum ecosystem. So what's important right now? We're thinking about things like stablecoin, like revenue, cash flow. And so projects that come to mind primarily are projects like Pendle, which has really kind of been dominating this stablecoin game and is really kind of looking to actually launch some of their latest roadmap features, I believe, any day now. We, of course, have projects like Maker, which is honestly just a cash flow engine. It's doing great. It's been in this massive uptrend as well, and I would imagine that it would continue to do well. So obviously, these are a bit on the bigger market cap side, but there's also a lot of smaller market caps that I think will provide a lot of opportunity as well. Obviously, other big projects that I think you should be watching out for are projects like Syrup, which has monstrous TVL kind of centered around stablecoins. We've seen projects like Uniswap. We're putting in, honestly, a God candle today, right? Hitting $10, which is massive. And I think you can kind of just look through this list here I have known as Ethereum Beta for different opportunities, right? Everything from Athena and their stablecoin and Lido, right? So really kind of, I would say, focus on just one or two projects that you believe are going to ride that narrative. And of course, be sure to like and subscribe because I'm going to be sharing my own portfolio and updates kind of as we continue through the rest of this year. That wraps it up, but be sure check the links below for the description. Come join the completely free community Discord. Lately, I've been building out the Hall of Fame for just all the incredible runs we've had recently. Everything from Kita to Pharaoh to Go and Farcoin when we caught all of these super early. If you have any question, always just drop me a follow on X, send me a DM. Would love to chat, but see you in the next one.